Glasgow. Now, tens of thousands of homes are still without power tonight as a result of substantial damage to the electricity network caused by the extreme weather. More strong winds and heavy rain are forecast for tomorrow and Saturday. So let's join my colleague George Alagaya, who's in Worcester for us tonight.
Thank you, Hugh, and good evening from Worcester, where the River Severn now stands at the highest level recorded by the Environment Agency. I must be about, 20 or 30 metres from where the riverbank used to be, and the water is now lapping around my boots still. Behind me is the main bridge that's across the city, and you can't see the arches beneath it. That's how high the water still is. Now, today has been a day of recovery after hurricane-force winds ripped through the rest of the UK. Now, Wales bore the brunt of it. Tens of thousands of households were left without power, as Hugh was saying. Our Wales correspondent, Howell Griffith, reports now on the clear-up and talks to families dealing with the aftermath of the storm.
Buildings blown wide open, lorries carried on the wind, and a huge clean-up bill, all left in the wake of the storm.
It's basically picked up the whole roof and then placed it back down again, but it's moved it.
Lizzie Mowatt's home has been in the family for a century and a half, but the gales which struck Porthmadog mean it may no longer be habitable.
I just want to burst into tears, really. I'm frightened that we've got to move out and we've got nowhere else to go.
For most homeowners, getting power back is the priority. The Prime Minister says energy firms should compensate disconnected customers.
We can't legislate for 100-mile-an-hour winds and 1 in 20-year events, but we have mitigated significantly the effects of that wind.
The winds which swept across Wales and the northwest yesterday were at hurricane force, enough to make static caravans mobile, enough to tear trees from the ground. Work is continuing to clear many roads, but it feels like an endless task. These repairs simply add to the millions and millions of pounds worth of work that was already needed after several weeks of severe weather. In the meantime, people are being warned to remain patient and expect delays on the roads and on the rails. The UK government has already pledged £61 million for infrastructure repairs. Today we learnt that money will have to come from existing budgets. For those still struggling after yesterday, the forecast is foreboding. Tomorrow could bring even greater storms. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Porthmadog.
Now, late this afternoon, the Environment Agency issued a severe weather warning for parts of the River Severn. Now, remember, that means they see a potential threat to life. Worcester survived the worst of last night's storm, but no one's taking any chances. In fact, students have been told to stay away from the university buildings that are around me now. In fact, as our correspondent Jeremy Cook reports, people along the river fear the floods will bring more misery.
Along its length, Britain's longest, mightiest river now carries a threat. Flows of 500 metres a second mean the Severn has burst its banks, the countryside inundated for mile after mile. It is an increasingly hostile environment, tough going even for the emergency services. In this sodden landscape, what you need is a boat. Near Tewkesbury, there's water everywhere. Yes, it's a floodplain, but it's been like this for weeks, and there are people out here who need help. And that's where these guys come in. They've been patrolling these lanes that have now become waterways for days now. They're bringing assistance to people who want to stay in their homes. They're bringing out people who are vulnerable and want to leave. And now, too, we've got this new problem of animal welfare. A mile from where the river should be, a farm is surrounded by water. On this tiny island, Graham Pool has 50 pregnant ewes, each expecting twins within days. What's your biggest concern? Your house is underwater, your farm's underwater, your ewes are about to lamb. What's the biggest issue for you?
Keeping these safe.
Do you feel like you've been pushed back and back and back? And this is the last...
Yeah, this is the...
You're high and dry, Graham?
Yeah.
So far?
This is our last stand.
Yeah. But with lambs already arriving, it's a logistical nightmare, and they're already facing an uncertain future. Upriver, better news. In Worcester, the city centre's saved, despite water all around at record levels. Pumps and barriers doing their job. In Ironbridge, it's a temporary barrier which is holding the Severn back. All the time and all the money is paying off. Without this, homes and businesses would be lost to the flood. But in Orney Terrace, Gloucester, another story. A red alert this afternoon. And a race to get the sandbags in as the River Severn rises. Now, just inches away from flooding a community which has seen it all before.
We were away 8 months last time.
8 months?
8 months. My house was absolutely shattered.
And what's your feelings today, now?
Well, I don't know. I'm a bit worried. I don't know how it's going to be.
Tonight, the final checks are being made.
We're still okay.
And for people here, like other communities before them, all that's left is to watch and wait and hope. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, Gloucester.
David Cameron has said today that there's to be a review of the Treasury rules governing flood defence spending, suggesting that they'd been applied too rigidly in the past. He said the abnormal weather over the past few weeks underlined how Britain needed to do better to make the country more resilient. Our science editor, David Shukman, considers the lessons learned from previous flooding crises.
In the Somerset Levels, massive new pumps brought in from Holland. The Dutch have the kind of expertise that comes from centuries of living below sea level. By contrast, what's happening here is an emergency response, and many people are asking if the country should have been better prepared. One major wake-up call came back in 2007. 50,000 homes were flooded, water supplies were cut off, and in the wake of the crisis, an inquiry led to a long list of recommendations to prevent this from being repeated. This afternoon, I was offered a lift in an amphibious car. It was the best way to see the village of Raisbury beside the Thames. It's been flooded before, but never for so long. I'm beside the River Thames in Middlesex. This car can also be a boat. This street has become a river. Now, every time there's a major flood, there's an inquiry and calls for action. This is the report from the 2007 floods. So the question is, have the lessons been learned? Well, looking around, it doesn't seem that they have. The inquiry, the Pitt Review, called for major reforms to keep the country safe. Better systems for warnings, that's definitely happened. More coordination between different agencies, that's also got much better. But the review also wanted spending on flood defences to increase above inflation. That hasn't happened.
The things that we said should happen are not happening, and it's really frustrating that people are suffering, and people are going to suffer now for quite a long time before the water drains away.
One big concern is infrastructure. Losing the main line to Cornwall is exactly the kind of damage that was warned about back in 2007. But at the same time, some technology has improved. This simulation of how a flood develops offers a far more accurate forecast of the areas at risk, and that can help save lives.
There has certainly been a lot of investment in both flood defences, but also flood modelling and flood forecasting systems to help raise awareness and improve our understanding of flooding in this country.
I'll just drop the shopping off. Oh, yeah.
Great. Meanwhile, life in the flood zone. Peter Kavanagh, the man with the amphibious car, brings the shopping and the mail. Coping with floods is one thing.
Whoops.
Preventing them is quite another. David Shukman, BBC News, in Raisbury.
Well, here in Worcester, you get the sense that people are holding their breath, waiting to see what tomorrow's storm will bring. Here, and for people right across much of the UK, there are a few more hours of relative calm before the next wave of severe weather, bringing with it wind, rain, snow, and probably more flooding. Well, that's all from us here in Worcester. Good night, and it's now back to you, Hugh.
George, thank you very much. George Alagai there and the team in Worcester.